The twin suns of Helios Prime beat mercilessly down on the scorched skin of the crimson wastes, baking Ryan Thorne's outpost until the air itself shimmered with heat. His hands, calloused and steady, tightened the last bolt on the water recycler. A hiss of pressure releasing like a final exhale. Sweat tracked down the curves of his sun-darkened muscles, cooling in the small of his back beneath a loose gray utility shirt. He straightened, rubbing a gritty palm across his brow, and took in the quiet no gunfire, no screaming comms, no commands shouted over chaos. Just the soft ping of contracting metal and the hum of the filtration unit. 15 months. That's how long he'd been out here alone. 15 blessed months without anyone needing him, without someone dying in his arms. After years as a Terran Special Forces operative, that silence was a luxury he hadn't known he'd crave, until he finally touched down and refused to leave again. No medals, no farewells, just the wind and sand and the rhythms of surviving. In a place too cruel for most to attempt, the outpost was old military surplus, meant for forward reconnaissance teams. Alone, Ryan had more room than he needed. A cot, a kitchen, a utility room stacked with ration bars and repair kits. A patch of UV-shielded crops in the back where he grew bitter vegetables that tasted like chewing metal but kept him alive. It wasn't paradise, but it was peace. He'd just finished dinner prep, a pan of sterilized tuber mash and something vaguely resembling protein when a sound shattered the routine. A scratching, soft, hesitant. He froze, his hand drifting instinctively to the pulse. Pistol holstered at his hip. The scratching came again, closer to a pawing now. Ryan moved to the security panel and activated the external camera, his eyes narrowing at the flickering image. Someone stood just outside the airlock. Short, covered in mottled blue fur with darker stripes, slender limbs. Huge amber eyes with vertical slits, too large for its face. It looked like a child. An alien cub, starving. Ryan could see the jut of ribs beneath its fur, the way it swayed slightly. Eyes locked on the camera with unmistakable desperation. His instincts screamed trap. There were species out here that use their young as bait, lure the bleeding hearts in, then strike. But the thing barely looked strong enough to stand, let alone spring a trap. He opened the outer door. The heat hit first, then the smell-dry fur and desperation. The cub stood in the threshold, its small body trembling. Its tufted ears lay flat against its head, and when it looked up at him, Ryan saw something that disarmed him more effectively than any weapon. Trust. "You lost, kid?" he asked, knowing it couldn't understand. The cub chirped softly, eyes flicking toward the food tray behind him. It was trying to be polite, Ryan realized. Despite everything, it wasn't just begging, it was asking. He sighed, stepped aside. "All right, come in. But no funny business." The cub padded in, graceful even in its weakness. Ryan retrieved a protein bar and some sliced tubers, placing them gently on the floor. The cub ate slowly, methodically, using small clawed fingers. With surprising delicacy. Not feral, not stupid. Just starving. He watched from a distance, something stirring inside him, something he hadn't felt since before the war had made everything numb. When the cub finished, it looked up at him and chirped again. A sound of thanks. Then, without warning, it darted for the door. "Hey, wait." Ryan followed, but the cub stood expectantly, pawing at the airlock. He opened it. "Be careful out there." The cub paused at the threshold, looked back one last time, then vanished into the dusk. Ryan exhaled and muttered to himself, "You're going soft, Thorne." He returned to his now cold meal, only half sitting before the scratching came again. With a groan, he stood and opened the door. And froze. The cub had returned, but this time it wasn't alone. Behind it stood A tall figure, feminine, regal, and unmistakably alien. Her fur was a deeper blue, marked by bold, sweeping stripes. Her body was athletic yet curved, wrapped in a sleek, unfamiliar fabric that clung to every contour. But it was her eyes, those same golden slits, now wide and intense, that stole the breath from Ryan's lungs. The cub chirped, stepping aside. Tigress stepped forward, and the air between them shifted forever. Asterisk, the silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the low hum of the airlock, still open behind Ryan. He stood motionless, every soldier's instinct tensed beneath his calm surface. Eyes locked with the alien female, now only a few feet away. She was stunning in a way he hadn't prepared for, graceful and tall, nearly matching his height, with smooth fur that shimmered like satin in the fading light. Her face, framed by swept-back ears and delicate feline features, was both fierce and impossibly beautiful. And her gaze pinned him to the spot. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and placed a clawed hand gently on her chest. Her other hand gestured toward the cub beside her, then to Ryan. Her lips moved in unfamiliar words, melodic and soft, but incomprehensible. Ryan blinked, thrown off by the elegance of her voice. It sounded like purring turned into speech. "You're welcome," he said awkwardly, trying to interpret her gestures. "I fed him, that's all." She watched him carefully, then mirrored his words slowly, her accent thick. "You fed son." Her hand returned to her chest. "I am Kira." Ryan hesitated, then pointed to himself. "Ryan Thorne." Her lips curved slightly. "Ryan." She tried the name again, more smoothly this time. "Ryan." The cub kit apparently chirped softly and leaned into Kira's side. She looked down at him with a soft expression, then back up at Ryan. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her, something earthy and warm, with a faint spice he couldn't place. There was an intensity to her now, the kind predators had, not malicious, but watchful. Deliberate dot, and then she purred. Ryan's eyebrows rose. Not like a sound of contentment, but a low, intimate vibration from her chest that filled the small space between them. She leaned in, slowly, and brushed the side of her face against his neck in one smooth, fluid motion. He froze. The soft velvet of her fur slid across his skin, warm and electric. It wasn't hostile, it was affectionate. He'd seen felines do it on Earth, sure, but this wasn't a cat. This was a sentient being, a woman. And that nuzzle felt personal. She stepped back, watching his reaction with those golden, unreadable eyes. "I do not know your customs," she said haltingly. "But we thank you." Ryan cleared his throat, struggling to find his balance again. I have a translator," he muttered, turning away to rummage through a locker. He needed anything to break the spell of that unexpected touch. When he found the old military-issue universal translator and powered it up, it let out a familiar whine before locking on to Kira's language. She spoke again, clearer now, though the translator gave. Her voice a clipped, mechanical edge. "You saved my son when others would have left him to die. That act binds me to you. Among my people, this creates a life debt." Ryan shook his head. "That's not necessary. I didn't do it for. You did not have to do it at all," the translator echoed from Kira's next words. "That is why it matters. I owe you, and I will repay." Kit chirped in agreement, nestling close to her side. Kira knelt slightly to place a hand over his head. "We must go before night predators come, but we will return. The stars brought our paths together, Ryan Thorne." Before he could answer, she stepped forward once more, and this time, deliberately brushed her cheek against his again. A slower, firmer motion. Her purr rumbled between them, and Ryan this time didn't pull away. Then, just like that, she turned, and with Kit scampering beside her, vanished into the deepening shadows of the desert. Ryan stood in the doorway long after. They were gone, heart thudding beneath his ribcage, the spot on his neck where she'd touched him still tingling. The door finally hissed shut behind him as he stepped back inside. He sat down heavily on the nearest chair and stared at nothing for a long moment. He had come to the Crimson Wastes to forget the world, but the world, it seemed, had just knocked. On his door with golden eyes, a quiet sun, and a promise that would change everything. Asterisk. The next morning brought no sign of Kira or Kit. The desert stretched wide and empty under the twin suns, its heat already rising in waves as Ryan paced the perimeter of his outpost. He told himself he was just checking for damage, maybe a solar panel loose or a leak in the recycler line, but he kept glancing toward the horizon, toward where she'd disappeared. Not like you're waiting on anyone, he muttered, tightening a bolt that didn't need it. But even as he returned inside and forced himself through the usual morning routine, sterilize water, check crop growth, run diagnostics on the filtration unit, his thoughts kept drifting back to Kira, to the way she'd looked at him, the way her voice sounded, even filtered through the translator, the feel of her fur against his skin. He wasn't built for this connection, affection, especially not with someone so alien. But damn if his body hadn't reacted like it was something he'd wanted all along. Just before midday, as the larger sun reached its zenith, the proximity alarm chirped. Ryan was across the room in seconds, pulling up the exterior feed, his heart rate inexplicably quickening. The figure on the screen wasn't Kira. It was Kit. Alone. Ryan didn't hesitate. The outer door opened, and the small blue cub stumbled in, panting, wild-eyed, his fur streaked with dust, and his ears flattened tight against his skull. The moment he saw Ryan, Kit let out a frantic series of chirps and grabbed at his pants, leg with desperate claws. "Whoa, slow down," Ryan said, kneeling. "Where's your mother?" Kit's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. He gestured frantically toward the desert, made a grabbing motion with his hands, then crossed his wrists and held them up. Ryan's stomach turned cold. No. He jumped up and retrieved the translator, powering it on as Kit continued babbling in his alien tongue. The device struggled for a moment, and finally rendered the words in flat, mechanical monotone. "Mother. Taken, bad hunters, cages, help." Ryan went still. "Your mother's been captured?" Kit nodded furiously, eyes brimming with urgency. "How long ago?" "2 sons, Ridge Place, big ship." Ryan didn't waste another second. He crossed to the weapons locker, unlocking the recessed panel with a code he hadn't used in months. The old combat vest came out first, followed by his pulse rifle. Then water rations, medkit, ammo packs. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not again. But the image of Kira's proud eyes and the warmth of her touch flooded back along with the memory of how fiercely she'd protected her son. She'd walked into a stranger's shelter without fear because her child had been fed, trusted him, and now she was gone. "Damn it," Ryan growled, strapping on the vest. "We're going after her." Kit's eyes widened. Then slowly, he stood straighter, determination settling over him like armor. "You'll need to show me exactly where." Ryan said, "Get ready. We leave in 10. The speeder roared to life beneath the harsh desert sun. Wind whipped through Ryan's hair as they tore across the crimson landscape. Kit strapped into the passenger seat beside him, pointing now and then to guide their direction. The translator buzzed occasionally with fragments of speech. Far. Rock, burn place, near red sand. But most of their communication came through urgent gestures and the silent understanding of 2 people with one mission. Save her. as the sun dipped lower. They reached the ridge. Jagged rock formations rose from the sand like broken bones, casting long shadows across the basin. Ryan slowed the speeder and pulled it into a crevice for cover. He handed Kit a pair of filtered goggles and checked the scope on his rifle. Then, they crept forward on foot. From the top of a rise, Ryan spotted the ship. Sleek, dark, coiled like a predator waiting to strike. And around it reptilian figures with scaled skin, heavy armor, and energy weapons slung across their backs. Sorens, slavers. He'd encountered them during his tours and hated them more than anything near the cargo bay. Metal cages sat in the dust like trophies. And in one of them, slumped but unmistakable, was Kira. Gotcha, Ryan breathed. Hang on. Kit made a whimper beside him. Ryan touched his shoulder, steadying him. We'll get her out, he said, but we'll need a plan. His mind began calculating patrol patterns, ship layout, environmental variables. But part of him had already decided. He wasn't leaving without her. Not now. Not ever. Asterisk. The sun had dipped behind the ridge by the time Ryan and Kit circled to the far side of the slaver camp. Night fell fast on Helios Prime, and with it came bone-cutting. Cold that hissed off the rock and turned the sand sharp underfoot. Ryan welcomed the darkness. It would give them cover. Still, the ridge felt too exposed, the enemy too many. But retreat was not an option. Not now. Not after he'd seen Kira in that cage. She hadn't looked broken, even drugged and restrained. Her posture had sagged, sure, and her limbs hung heavier than usual. But her eyes, when he saw them, even from that distance, still held fire. Still had that fierce defiance. And that fire burned in him now, stoked by every mile of desert they'd crossed. From behind a low bluff of rock, Ryan took one last look through the scope. 6 visible Saurons, all armed. More inside, probably. He knew their kind muscle over tactics, cocky enough to slack on night patrols. That overconfidence would be their undoing. Kit tugged his sleeve and pointed toward a narrow service hatch. At the ship's underside, the child whispered through the translator. Father showed me maintenance. Can disable engines, comms, I can help. Ryan hesitated, conflict tearing through him. Bringing a kid into enemy territory went against every survival instinct. But Kit's eyes were clear and steady, just like Kira's, just like his father's must have been before he died. All right, Ryan whispered. You go in through the hatch. Disable the comms first, then the engines. That'll stop them from calling for help or running. Then find a place to hide. I'll get your mother. Kit nodded without hesitation. Ryan knelt and gripped his small shoulder. You're brave, but don't try to be a hero. Just finish your part and stay safe. Promise, Kit said, then slipped away into the dark like a shadow, his movement fluid and silent. Ryan circled wide. The desert was silent, save for the distant thrum of the ship's generators. No guards near the cargo ramp now, just 2. Sorens inside the hold, talking, laughing, confident. Ryan activated his pulse rifle's safety override and crept closer. He bypassed the external lock with an old, military code override still useful, even out here. The cargo ramp hissed down. In near silence. Inside, the hold was dim and cold. A row of cages lined the wall, most empty. Only one was occupied. Kira. Her head rested against the bars, her breathing shallow. Her lapis fur looked dull in the red emergency lights that had flickered on after Kit's sabotage began. Ryan's gut clenched as he saw the mark on her shoulder branded. Not deeply, but enough. Rage ignited behind his ribs. I'm here, he whispered as he reached her cage. I'm getting you out. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of his voice. Her lips parted. A soft sound escaped. "Rianne, I've got you," he said, working the lock. "Just hold on." When it clicked open, he caught her before she collapsed. Her body was light but warm, even in her weakened state. The soft sound of purring vibrated against his chest as he cradled her. His rifle slung over his shoulder. Then came footsteps, voices. The Sorens were alert. Now Kit had succeeded. Time to move. Ryan muttered. He ducked behind stacked cargo containers. Just as the cargo hold door opened and two Sorens stormed in, hissing curses. "The female is missing." One growled. "Impossible. The sedative." Ryan didn't let them finish. He rose from behind the crates and fired. Two bursts of blue-white light dropped them instantly. Precise, clean, the way he'd been trained. Humans. One hissed. With his last breath. Always interfering. Ryan didn't respond. He moved quickly now, dodging through the hold and heading toward the hatch. Doors malfunctioned around him, opening, closing, lights flickering. Kit had really done a number. On their systems, he met the child at the exit. Kit was breathless, but smiling, eyes bright. Coolant system rerouted, the translator reported. "If they try to launch, they'll melt their own engines." "Remind me not to underestimate you," Ryan said with a tight grin. They bolted. Into the desert, Kira secured in his arms, her soft purr still alive beneath his touch. Kit ran beside him, live and fast, never once looking back. Behind them, alarms howled. Sparks lit the underside of the ship. The Sorens roared in frustration. But it was too late. By the time they reached the speeder, Ryan's arms ached from carrying her, but he didn't care. He strapped Kira into the passenger seat with care, her head lolling onto his shoulder, her breath brushing his skin. "Will she be okay?" Kit asked. Ryan checked her pulse stronger now. Her pupils were reacting. Her purring was deeper, fuller. "She's a fighter," he said softly. "She'll pull through." As if on cue, Kira stirred and looked up at him. Her lips curled into a faint smile. "You came," she whispered. "I told you I would. You're my champion." Then she slipped back into sleep. Ryan swallowed hard and touched her cheek gently. This was no longer just a rescue. This was a bond, and he would protect it with everything he had. Asterisk. The station came into view just as the first sun crested the horizon, washing the desert in gold and amber. Ryan guided the speeder up the slope, with one hand on the controls and the other cradling Kira's head, her body still nestled gently against him. She stirred only occasionally, letting out soft, contented purrs that vibrated faintly through his chest. Kit sat in the back, eyes alert despite his exhaustion, watching the terrain with quiet vigilance. They arrived to stillness. The outpost, Ryan's sanctuary for over a year, now felt like something different entirely. Not just a shelter, not just solitude. It had become something worth defending because it now sheltered people he cared about. He carried Kira inside, her body limp but warm, her fur soft against his arms. Kit followed closely, silent and protective. Ryan set her down carefully on his bed, brushing a stray lock of lapis blue hair from her face. "She sleep off the sedative," he said softly to Kit. "Her body's strong. She be okay." Kit nodded, but didn't leave her side. He climbed onto a low bench beside the bed and curled into a small ball, one hand resting on his mother's arm. Within minutes, he was asleep too, his breathing slow and steady. Ryan stood there for a long time, just watching them. Then, quietly, he turned and went to work. He activated defense protocols he hadn't touched in months, motion sensors, perimeter drones, even the old turret mounts hidden in the outpost's outer walls. He and Kit had already reinforced key systems during the ride home, but now Ryan went through every line of code himself, checking each one twice. He placed warning tripwires at key choke points and wired the eastern passage with proximity charges salvaged. Gear from his military days. If the slavers came back, they'd find a fortress, not an outpost. When he finally paused, the twin suns were already arching across the sky. The station's cooling systems whirred to life. Ryan wiped his brow, downed a full canteen, and checked on his guests. Kira was stirring. Her ears twitched at ambient noise. Her tail shifted against the bed. Her fingers, clawed but slender, flexed once, then again, and then her eyes opened, golden, slitted, still a little unfocused, but unmistakably alert. "Ryan," she murmured, her voice husky from sleep. "I'm here," he said, stepping into her view. "Kit's here too. You're safe." Kira tried to sit up, but winced. Ryan was there in a second, gently easing her back down. "Take it slow. You were drugged. Still working it out of your system." Her hand reached for his, her claws retracting as she rested her palm against his skin. The purring returned, softer now, but deliberate. "You came for me?" she whispered, more lucid this time. He nodded. "Of course I did." "You fought them." "I shot a few, yeah." Her lips curved into a tired smile. "You risked everything." He shook his head. "I couldn't just leave you." Her eyes glimmered, even in the dimmed light of the room. "You could have. Most would have." Ryan looked away, unsure how to answer. He wasn't used to being the center of gratitude or affection. "I had to," he said finally. "You mattered. You and Kit. That's enough." Kira reached up, her fingers brushing the line of his jaw. The touch was light, reverent, but it sent a current through him. He didn't pull away. "Among my people," she said, the translator echoing her words. "Courage and protection. It creates a bond, deeper than blood. I feel that bond now with you." Ryan's voice was quiet. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. Her purring deepened into a rhythmic pulse, her hand still warm on his cheek. For a long moment, they stayed like that, connected, not by culture, not by species, but by something older, instinct, kindness, trust. Then, the proximity alarm blared. Ryan was on his feet in an instant, sprinting to the control panel. The screen flashed red. Movement. Detected west quadrant. Multiple life signs. Heavy heat signatures. Transport class vehicle. Kira was beside him a second later, moving with feline grace despite her earlier weakness. "Draconians," she said flatly, her voice sharpened by instinct. "Lord Vex doesn't send scouts, he sends armies." The external cameras activated. Ryan's stomach dropped. A massive assault carrier hovered over the desert, sand swirling beneath its thrusters. Smaller combat skiffs were deploying fast, at least 20 soldiers, armored head to tail in gleaming black scale plates, already advancing on the outpost. He stared at the screen in disbelief. "They found us faster than I expected." Kit stumbled in, wide-eyed and frightened, but trying to be brave. "I can help," he said, clutching a small tool set. "I remember what Father showed me, systems, traps." "No," Ryan and Kira said together. Ryan dropped to one knee in front of him. "Listen, Kit, we need you to do something more important. Remember the hidden compartment we built? You hide there. Stay silent. Don't come out until we tell you. But your mother and I can't fight if we're worried about you. This is how you protect her now." Kit bit his lip, tears welling up, but he nodded. Kira embraced him fiercely, whispering in their language before ushering him toward the concealed hatch. He vanished inside, and the walls slid shut. Then Kira turned to Ryan. Her golden eyes burned. "What's our strategy?" He activated the auto turrets, loaded his rifle, and triggered the electrified panel defenses. "We hold," he said. "And we make them regret ever landing on my planet." Their eyes met. Not fear, not despair. But resolve. Together. Asterisk. The first explosion lit up the desert like a second sun. A cluster of proximity mines Ryan had planted during the early months of his solitude, forgotten, until now detonated beneath the lead skiff as it approached the outer perimeter. The blast ripped the vehicle apart, sending draconian soldiers tumbling through the sand. Fire bloomed. Screams echoed. Ryan didn't flinch. He was already moving, rifle in hand, his body responding with the same cold efficiency that had earned him his command years ago. Kira moved beside him like a shadow, her blue fur catching glints of firelight, her energy pistol humming with deadly intent. The two of them were no longer strangers, no longer rescuer and rescued. They were partners. The remaining Draconians surged forward with terrifying precision. These weren't slavers for hire. They were former soldiers, mercenaries who traded oaths for credits. Ryan had seen their kind before, disciplined, brutal, utterly without conscience. "They're splitting their attack," Kira warned, watching the thermal feeds as enemy signals fanned out across the terrain. Two squads circling wide, one heading straight for the east door. "That's the breach point," Ryan said. "Get to position 2. I'll draw their fire when they hit the main hatch." Kira nodded without hesitation and vanished into the shadows, silent and swift. When the east door finally gave way, blasted inward in a wave of dust and heat, Ryan was waiting behind cover, his pulse rifle already tracking targets. The first two Draconians dropped before they cleared the smoke. A third made it halfway into the room before Ryan's shot slammed into his helmet, sending him crashing to the floor. Behind the chaos, Kira emerged from the shadows, flanking with surgical precision. Her pistol hissed once, twice, each shot clean. Each strike final. They held the breach. For now, but more came. The second wave hit from the west, forcing them to fall back to the central corridor, where Ryan had rigged additional defenses, floor traps, collapsible barriers, a final line of explosives hidden in the ceiling. The station shuddered with every impact. Between bursts of fire, Kira leaned close, her chest heaving with adrenaline, her body pressed against his as they reloaded. "If we don't make it, we will," Ryan said firmly. "I have to say, she insisted. "Last night, it wasn't just attraction. Among my people, what we shared bonded us. Life bonded. I didn't plan it, but I don't regret it." Ryan's breath caught, not from fear, but from the gravity of her words. He hadn't understood before. But now, as her eyes locked with his through smoke and fire, he did. "I don't regret it either," he said quietly. "In fact, it might be the best thing I've ever done." She reached out and took his hand. A single moment. A pause in the war. Then the wall exploded inward, and the final assault began. The Draconians poured in, dozens now, shouting war calls in their guttural tongue. Ryan and Kira moved as one, covering, flanking, retreating only when forced. The turrets failed. The traps triggered. But still they came. Ryan took a hit, an energy bolt seared across his shoulder. He staggered, dropped behind cover, and hissed through clenched teeth. "You're hurt." "Still breathing," he grunted, but the pressure was mounting. They were down to their final fallback point. The main living area converted now into a last redoubt. Overturned furniture made barricades. Every last round of ammunition was stacked within reach. Ryan could feel the end pressing in. A final stand. Then, a sound broke through the chaos. A shrill tone from the long-range scanner. Not from the battle. From orbit. New signatures. Multiple. Ryan darted to the console. His heart stopped. Terran military vessels. 3 cruisers. Heavy class. He hit the comms. "This is Ryan Thorne." "Repeat, Ryan Thorne. If you can hear me, We are under siege at Outpost. Delta, Crimson Wastes. Draconian hostiles in force. The speaker crackled to life. A familiar voice answered. Lieutenant Thorne, this is Admiral Marcus Harding, TDF Relentless. Area is confirmed hostile. Reinforcements inbound. Medical units. On standby. Hold tight, old friend. We've got eyes on you. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Across the room, Kira's eyes widened. Your people? They found us. Outside, the Draconians suddenly froze. Their commander barked something sharp and guttural. Then retreat. Not disorderly, but fast and focused. Skiffs roared to life. Bodies were retrieved, and within minutes, they were gone. Just gone. Ryan slumped against the wall, the adrenaline finally draining. He turned to Kira, still holding her pistol, eyes wild. It's over, he said. We're alive. She stepped forward and cupped his face. You brought them. You saved. U.S. No, Ryan said. We saved us. The outpost door burst open moments later as Terran medics flooded in. Kit emerged from his hiding place just as Ryan sank to one knee, too exhausted to stand. The child rushed into his mother's arms. Sobbing against her chest, Ryan watched them reunite, and something in his chest finally cracked open. Purpose, family. Future Harding arrived last, clad in the polished black of a fleet admiral, a rare smile on his face. You really can't stay out of trouble, can you, Thorne? Ryan grinned weakly. Guess I'm not built for retirement. Harding nodded toward Kira and Kit. The council wants to talk. A lot of interest in this story. You're something of a legend now. Ryan stood slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. He looked at Kira, then at Kit, then out the door to the dawn rising over the scarred desert. No more running, he said. We build something better, right here. And together, they stepped into the light of a new day, no longer strangers. No longer alone, but a family forged in fire, and bound by the most human thing of all. Hope. ***, the Andy.